That changes. Looks good. Retired quite a few years.
Well, I found out about rangers.
Through there. Tucson.
Well, I do want to welcome you and thank you for taking time to come here and celebrate Rick. Thank you very, very much. I have to tell you that I've received many condolences, cards, and calls and emails from many of you and many other people, and I really appreciate that, expressing the condolences. But most importantly, what I really appreciated was you telling me what Rick meant to you as a person, and that just it just kept him alive in my heart. So thank you very much for doing that. I'm going to just thank a couple of people, if you don't mind, also before I turn the mic over. I'd like to thank a couple of people who worked very closely with me to put this together. They were behind the scenes. Rob and Elvira Arnberger, Bill Wade, Butch Farabee, Bill Smith, and Eric Smith. Thank you very much. It just kind of helped me put the concept together, work with me. It did a lot of the behind the scenes stuff to have this take place. A big thank you also to the speakers. I've spoken to many of you now, and I know that you've put a lot of work into your speeches, and I know that it's very difficult because we have asked you to maybe put a lifetime or years of memories into 5 minutes. And I hear that Butch, that you've gotten 30 minutes here from Jenny, so. I'm sorry, 30 seconds, I'm sorry. So, okay. I'd also like to give and recognize Shira Brady, because Shira's been a big help. I was telling her I wanted to do a slideshow and this or that, and Shira just kind of took it right out of my hands and said, I'll develop the slideshow, you just send me all the pictures and everything. And she did that. And also, I wanted some posters, and she's a photographer, so I sent her some pictures, and she worked, she designed and produced posters, the 2 posters out front of Rick, and one shows his life and everything, and one is just of a young Rick Ranger. Shira, would you just stand up for a minute? So I know we like. Thank you very much. I also have a very special thank you for our niece, Ellen Walker, who is a film major at the University of Arizona, and she is going to be filming this. She, again, I happened to mention it to her. She took the job and ran with it. She got the equipment, and she has set it up, and she's sitting right over here. She's filming this whole thing. And then a special thank you to Jamie, who will be the MC tonight at the reception. Special thank you to Bill Smith, Rick's brother, better known as Wheeze, who will be the MC for this event. But before I turn the mic over to Wheeze, what I'd like to do is ask, we have 2 special guests with us, and Butch is going to introduce them and have them speak. They are the officials from Grand Canyon National Park.
I'm Butch Farabee, and I'm a recovering ranger. What I'd like to introduce are the superintendent and the chief ranger. Now, I've not met either one of them, but we've been dealing with them back and forth about all of this event. So I will give a quick bios on both of them, and then let them just say a few words if you guys don't mind. Ed Keeble is the superintendent since 2020, Grand Canyon, a Vermont Law School graduate, Judge Advocate General Office, for more than 2 decades, and then in the Department of the Interior Solicitor's Office since about 2020 when he became superintendent here. And then, but Ed, why don't you say some words if you want? First of all, let me introduce, there you are. I will, after him, I will introduce Justin as well.
Thank you all, and thank you, Kathy. I would like to start by welcoming you to the Grand Canyon National Park, but you're not at the Grand Canyon National Park. There's a bit of a story there. You may have seen in the press that the federal government is shut down due to a lapse of appropriation, and we had hoped to convene this event at the Shrine of the Ages in the park, but that facility is locked, and under the rules of federal appropriations, locked facilities are supposed to stay locked during a government shutdown. Kathy reached out to me a few days ago, and when we tried to figure out if we could get a way around that, and eventually I got to yes, but Kathy, being an efficient person, found another site before I got to yes. So I'm sorry that we're not able to convene this event at Grand Canyon, but I welcome you to visit the park. Another feature of the lapse of appropriation is the gate entrances are not staffed, and entrance to the park is free. So before Congress passes an appropriation, come into the park, and all of our facilities are open, all of our non-governmental facilities. So the restaurants, the hotels, the bookstores are all open. The trails, of course, are all open. So please feel free to come to the park and enjoy the grandeur of the Grand Canyon National Park. In my exchanges with Kathy, she shared a little bit about Rick, whom I've never had the pleasure of meeting, but am impressed with what I've learned about him. He seems to have been a terrific human being and a really good leader. And I will tell you, at times like this, the National Park Service, federal government, needs good leaders. So I appreciate his service to the National Park Service, and hope that those of us who are in leadership positions can lean on the experience that he taught us by his example, and we will get through the challenges that we are facing, and hopefully do it with the same measure of good spirits and goodwill that Rick managed throughout his career. So thank you for inviting me to the event, and I hope you have a good time reminiscing about your experiences with Rick. And like I said, enjoy the park if you can. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed, and welcome to the National Park Service, by the way. Right now, I would like to introduce the Chief Ranger, Justin Culley. And again, let me do this. Began as a fee collector in 1998 as a seasonal fee collector. A lot of us were seasonals, apparently. In and around law enforcement and fire for 21 years in 5 different areas. And Justin, on behalf of the Rangers in this group, I would like to thank you for your service, as well as Ed, and then say a few words if you don't mind.
I wasn't really planning on getting up and speaking in front of everybody, but I will say it's hard to follow Ed Keeble. I'm honored to be here amongst so many great people that have forged the way for where we're currently at within the Ranger ranks of the National Park Service. I know Rick is here in spirit and looking down. I've enjoyed the last couple weeks talking via email with Butch and Kathy, and they've shared a tremendous amount of information about Rick and his history, and I'm floored what he's done for the Ranger careers and so forth around the world, not only in the States. So I want to say welcome. If there's anything I can do while you all are here, please reach out. But thanks.
Thank you, Justin. Bill? I can't call him Weasel. I just have to call him Bill.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for our welcome that you gave us, and thank you all for gathering here today to celebrate the life of Rick Smith, a very special person to us all. My name is Bill Smith, Rick's brother, but many of you here know me better as Weasel. That's the nickname that Rick gave me when I was only 5 years old. And I would also like to mention the group that helped plan the tribute. And that group, of course, was headed up by Kathy, Rick's beacon of love and wife of 45 years. And at this point, I would also like to remind us all, and I'm probably the one who needs it most, to remember to silence our phones as we go on through the program here today. During our gathering, we are going to hear from several of Rick's friends and fellow Rangers. And I would like to thank them for all that they have done for the parks and for just giving all of these memories and the reflections of Rick that we will hear today. I would also like to thank the many family members of Rick and Kathy who are with us today. You know, and as I look out on this group, I kind of envision a tapestry. And it's a beautifully woven and colorful tapestry. And I also see a special thread kind of weaving its way through us and pulling us closer and closer together. And you know, that special thread is Rick. You know, as we start reflecting on Rick's life, where do we all begin? Since I grew up side by side with Rick, I'm going to start at the beginning. Rick was born in 1938 in a tiny little town called Ionia, Michigan. He was the first child of Bill and Mary Smith, two teachers who met while they were teaching at the same high school. My brother Phil was second in line, and as much as I dislike the expression, I was the baby of the family. You know, as I was growing up, I considered my brothers to be my heroes. And I might add, they were two pretty tough acts to follow. Our mom was the girls' basketball coach at school, and Dad coached the boys. So is it any wonder that the Smith brothers all became high school basketball players? And then, you know, as World War II began, our dad started teaching survival swimming to naval recruits at the Ann Arbor YMCA. With a family history like that, is it any wonder that Rick became a skillful ranger who could climb, hike, scuba dive, ride in helicopters and fight forest fires to help park visitors survive? You know, his early physical skills started to blossom when the Smith brothers performed trampoline and gymnastics exhibitions for various service clubs around Ann Arbor. On the trampoline, Rick could do all the exciting flips and twists, but Phil and I did the less daring tricks like trampoline seat drops and headstands. During the summer, we all attended and then later became counselors at the YMCA summer camp. That's where Rick perfected his rowing, paddling, and sailing skills. But you will hear more about that from some of our other guests later on. You know, Rick also developed a keen sense of humor. For example, last March, when we asked Rick what actor should play him in an upcoming film documentary called Dope Lake, Rick answered without a moment's hesitation, but with that special glint in his eye, Robert Redford. When our dad switched to Y-Work, Mom continued to teach Latin. Thus, the Smith boys all had to take Latin because, as Mom explained, it would help our English proficiency. We were a little skeptical of that, but it certainly helped Rick become proficient in Spanish. So much so that during his Peace Corps years in South America, Rick was assigned to be a professor at the University of Asunción in Paraguay. Albion College was another important segment of Rick's development, and you will soon hear more about that. After college, he started as a teacher and then joined the national parks full-time and enjoyed several significant career milestones. I remember his first years and summers in Yellowstone, and thanks to a new TV show that was called Yogi Bear, he soon became known as Ranger Rick. In his years at Yosemite, Carlsbad Caverns in the Everglades also come to mind, as well as helping with several other rangers in this room to open up the Alaskan National Park lands. You know, I would also like to add how memorable it was for Rick to receive the Gordon Miller Lifetime Achievement Award last December from the International Ranger Federation. That ceremony really warmed Rick to his very core. In closing, Rick, Phil, and I were blessed to grow up under the loving guidance of two super parents. They personified for us the motto, service above self. And as we can all attest here today, Rick lived that motto to the fullest as he related to family, friends, fellow employees, and so many others he crossed paths with throughout his life. At our summer camp that we all worked at, we would always close every campfire by singing taps. I would like to conclude my reflections today and dedicate the final words of taps to my dear brother Rick. All is well, safely rest, God is nigh. Well, our next speaker today is going to be Rick's nephew from Colorado, Eric Smith.
Good afternoon. As we said, I'm Rick's nephew, Eric. Though Rick always called me E-Ball. I don't quite recall the origin of that nickname, but in honor of Rick, you're welcome to call me that too. My father, Phil, was the middle son of the Smith boys, as Weez mentioned, and I feel like I won the lottery when it came to my parents, Phil and Kitty, and my uncles, Weez and Rick. Before I share my reflection of Rick, I want to recognize several family members who are here today but not speaking. My wife, Sandy, on the front row here, she and I drove down from Boulder. My sister, Julie, is over here. She and her husband, Ben, flew in from Alabama. And their daughters, Emma and Ellen, they drove in from Flagstaff in Tucson. None of us members of the younger generation of Smiths and Walkers would have missed being here to celebrate our uncle and great uncle. We all loved Rick for many reasons, from his dry, sharp wit, to his gentle spirit, to his extraordinary storytelling, and we miss him terribly. This service is called, as you see on your programs, Celebrating the Big Life of Rick Smith, and it was big, legendary even, as you all know. But I want to reflect on several small things he did that added up and made his life so big. Some of you might see, at least I hope you see, a resemblance I have with my uncle. I'm sure the hair helps. But you might also recognize this vest I'm wearing. It was Rick's back in the day, and it's one of my prized possessions because it was his, and because, like him, it's pretty damn cool. I don't remember when he gave it to me, but he often passed things down to me that I quickly grew to cherish. Rick gave me my first backpack, an external frame, Kelty, that had his Yellowstone Ranger mailing address written on the back in marker. He gave me several pairs of skis. He even gave me my first laptop. But with each gift, with each item he handed down, he gave something of himself, something more important than a piece of clothing or gear or electronic. Along with giving me the vest and backpack, he taught me a love for outdoor adventure and travel, and an appreciation for the natural world and our national parks, including helping me land a job in Yosemite when I was 19. Along with handing down his old skis, he taught me how to ski, an activity I love to this day. Whenever I click into my bindings, I think of Rick and thank him for his patient instruction all those years ago at Sandia Peak. Along with the laptop he gave me, he inspired me to write and always has supported my craft. Whenever he read something I wrote, he was among the first to send a quick note, usually something pithy yet heartfelt, like, "Another good one, E-Ball." He also handed down one of the best pieces of advice I ever received, advice that changed my life. In the spring of 1997, I was living in Colorado when I decided to move back to my hometown of Memphis to be with a girl I'd been dating long distance for the previous few months. On my drive back to Memphis, I swung through Placitas to spend some time with Rick and Kathy. That last morning in New Mexico, as I was getting into my car to drive toward a life I didn't realize in that moment was inauthentic, Rick said something to me that stuck. He looked at me, shook his head, and he said, in his typical no BS way, "Now, E-Ball, I don't want you to stay in Memphis too long. You belong out west." That comment had a huge impact on me. Rick, ever the straight shooter, with keen insights, knew where I needed to be more than I did. A couple of days later, my former boss in Denali called to offer me my old job. Now, I had already turned him down once because I decided to move back to Memphis. But when the offer arose a second time, Rick's words, "You belong out west," echoed in my brain. I knew he was right, so I said yes. A few weeks later, I flew to Alaska, where I met Sandy, and the rest is history. I don't know if I ever told Rick that story. It came back to me as I was thinking about what I'd shared today, but it speaks to the power, influence, and wisdom Rick had. So many things he said and did over the years have stuck with me and so many of us. They were small things at the time, but their impact was enormous. That was Uncle Rick. He lived a big life, and he left an even bigger legacy, all because of the many, many little things he did for the people and places he loved. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Uncle Rick.
Our next guest listed in the program is Forrest Heaton. I'm honored to read these next reflections of Rick from Forrest, one of Rick's closest friends. But unfortunately, he and his wife, Mary, were unable to attend today because of some medical concerns. Hello to you all. My name is Forrest Heaton, and I am honored to have been asked by Kathy to help celebrate Rick's life. Due to my friendship with Rick, I rafted 2 western rivers with some of you. You probably knew me then by my nickname, Wally. My wife Mary and I say hello from afar to those of you we have met before. Rick's life was a big life. Rick and I were friends for over 70 years. We both went to Albion College in Michigan and were roommates for 2 years. Smith, my nickname for Rick, and I discovered we like the same things: political science, history, and good music. We pledged the same fraternity, and we love to sing and play our guitars. A connection I bet many of you shared with Rick was travel. Smith loved to travel. We had a good friend named Rod Nash who taught Rick how to run rivers, and he taught Rick well. Rick invited me on a rafting trip down the Yampa River in Dinosaur National Monument. And it was a fabulous adventure. Other travel, when Rick called me and advised me after my wife of 30 years had died of cancer in 2006, he said, "Wally, much healing happens in nature." He then invited me to run the Colorado River with him right here in the Grand Canyon. It was another truly exciting and very therapeutic experience. In preparation for our 50th college reunion in 2010, Smith called and advised me that we needed to give Albion a gift, a thank you gift for a superb education. I asked, "Why us?" Rick replied, "Who else?" So we took it on. Along with a small group of classmates, we met with the college president, and we came up with a unique idea. The town of Albion had just lost its major industry, an iron foundry. We decided to fund an endowment that would provide college interns to help in the city's recovery. And our class contributed $50,000. As Albion continues to make a dramatic Rust Belt recovery, We are pleased to know that our class is contributing to that effort. The endowment is now in its 15th year and still growing. The college just advised me the endowment has a recent market value of $220,293.53. Now, Rick didn't know of this when he passed. So allow me to yell it loudly to his soul. $220,290.53. Smith and I loved music. He called me once and asked if I'd heard the latest from Simon and Garfunkel. Since I worked for American Express, I thought he was referring to an investment firm. He chided me gently and said I had to keep up with the music of the day. He would sing songs to me over the phone. Chris Christopherson, Janis Joplin, and so many others. How he loved to sing and play the guitar. And Smith was well trained, having taken classical guitar lessons while he was in the Peace Corps in South America. I have 3 kids and 2 grandkids. Due to Smith, we have all focused most of our travels on national parks, and it has been joyous. Smith and I traveled together, sang together, shared our thoughts and activities together, and called each other frequently to boost our spirits. My life and all of our lives are richer due to Smith. Next to my wife, Mary, Rick was my closest friend. God bless you, Rick. We miss you and we love you. Now, our next guest speaker today will be Margaret Aldrich.
Let me just see about the level of this. Let me share a life-changing experience and some of the learnings offered me by my friend Rick Smith. It was in Yosemite where Rick suggested a hike. Little did he know that while I love to hike, I suffered from acute acrophobia whenever I hiked above the tree line. The result was that I would drop down onto my hands and knees and crawl, terrified of falling onto rocks. Rick asked me, what the hell was I doing? He said, you're wearing brand new hiking boots and with deep tread. However, your knees possess no tread or grip. They are smooth. At this point, Rick raised his voice and told me to stand up and walk. I told Rick that I was afraid of falling on rock and possibly having a panic attack. I asked Rick if that was what outcome he wished for me. Rick told me he could handle it, and again told me to just stand up and walk. I was terrified, but I trusted Rick. So somehow I overcame my deep fear of heights and did what Rick was insisting I do. That was the beginning of many adventures that Rick enabled for me by helping me overcome my fear of heights and of falling. For example, when I was invited to join Rick and a small group of friends, including a number of you who are here today, to raft on the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon, I felt privileged. Even when I was ejected twice into the river. Because I had been building up my courage and physical strength to face some very large rapids, I was at least able to stay afloat in that fast-moving water. That same developing courage later enabled me to track cheetahs in Namibia, a trip which Rick urged me to take. Fortunately, I was reassured by the knowledge that those cats had just eaten breakfast, had swollen bellies, and fortunately weren't hungry enough to eat me. Rick also helped me overcome claustrophobia. That solution this time was to experience caving, where Rick helped me lower myself via ropes into a pitch black cave deep below the surface of the earth. Hopefully in the dark, Rick wasn't trying to do me in. Later on, to advance my career, Rick pushed me to pursue and accept a job and move to Europe by myself for 3 years without family or friends. That turned out to be one of the most important experiences, highlights of my life. So once again, thank you, Rick Smith, for your teaching and friendship over many years, especially for instilling in me a love of the national parks and Indian reservations also. Thank you, my dear friend Rick, for enriching my entire life. You are and will be missed by every one of us here today. And thank you, Kathy, for inviting me to say a few words about and to Rick. It was an honor. Thank you.
Our next presenter today is going to be Butch Farabee.
Kathy and Rick's family, our thoughts are with you. And I'm going to dedicate this piece to Rick and all federal employees. I'm Butch Farabee, you already heard that, and I'm scared up here. But I'm going to have to read this so I don't wander and so I can make the time limit. This is an hour presentation, and I'm going to try to do it as quick as I can. I claim 3 families. 2 are biological, and I love them dearly. The third is the Yosemite Mafia. My wife and I transferred into Yosemite Valley after 3 years in the Tucson Police Department in 1971, and Rick came in the following year, 1972. Let me paint a picture of what the country looked like during the 70s. For those of you who are too young, hit up the white hair that's next to you for information. Our country was in chaos. Sound familiar? We were chest deep in Vietnam, burning draft cards, Kent State, National Guard, Woodstock, and Watergate, and over 400 race riots. Counterculture, think hippie Volkswagen vans with peace symbols, love beads, wall-to-wall LSD and marijuana, burning bras, and sexual revolution. Yosemite Valley was the most intense, busiest piece of geography in the entire national park system. Full stop. Rangers there did it all with lots of heart and little training. Actually, we averaged 650 physical arrests, 32 deaths, mostly traumatic, 150 search and rescues, 500 emergency medical responses, and 1,000 other responses. There was a 15-bed hospital and a 22-bed jail in the valley, and it was full much of that time. If lucky, Rangers got a week worth of training annually, if they were lucky. We made felony arrests, started IVs, performed CPR, served as coroners, drove ambulances and fire trucks, fought forest fires and entered burning buildings, routinely darted problem bears, and after jumping from a helicopter, dangled off world-class cliffs. Scuba dived under waterfalls and frozen lakes. We wrestled visitors high on LSD and put some of them in straitjackets. And all through that, 24/7, we knew that we had each other's backs. Lifelong friendships formed and marriages took place. Some of them even lasted. But way too many 12-hour days resulted in way too many divorces. We celebrated the birth of our children and watched them joyously grow for the next 50 years. We also lost children there and still grieve for them. Fast forward to 79 and 80, 2 teams of 21 Rangers went to Alaska after the service's number 2 in Washington, the deputy director. Rick had to pass the list by him. He said, infamously, I don't want any of those damn Yosemite Rangers there, however. I don't care who else, but not the Yosemite Mafia. So all became leaders, movers and shakers, chief rangers, and lots of superintendencies, including Yosemite and Yellowstone. There were 4 chief rangers of the entire National Park Service, 2 who are in this room. I always contended that Rick was one of the guys who changed the attitude from being derogatory and insulting and pejorative to something that was good. And Rick and I debated that until like the last week of his life. So, Rick, on behalf of the Yosemite Mafia, oh Jesus, you know, if you read this and you skip stuff, you have to go back, right? And this is important. It was a calling, a mission for those very talented men and women during those demanding years. Many are in this room, but we're all highly successful, a perfect storm, if I may, more so because of our better halves, which some of them were in uniform. Gwen, Paula, Georgine, Dot, Lou, Caroline. Thank you, ladies. I hope I didn't miss any of you. So, as I said, I've always contended that Rick turned that around. And I'm going to give the other 5 minutes I was supposed to do at the open mic tonight on the birth of the Ranger Association. Thank you.
Our next presenter will be Walt Dabney.
Thank you. Can you hear this okay? Being from Texas, I've never been accused of being quiet, so I'll not change it now. Kathy, thanks. This has been a hoot. We've been here, some of us, since yesterday, telling stories. Somebody said, you guys tell the same stories over and over, and I'll just assure you they're never the same. They get better and better as the years go. And it's not that we lie, but a ranger's going to make a story good. And the kernel of it that's there, that's real, is real. But the rest of it, it's got to be a good story. Butch talked about Yosemite, and it was a magical experience. And many, many of the people in this room were in Yosemite starting in 1971. There was a riot in Yosemite in 1970, and it was an awful thing. Park Service had no idea how to deal with it. They clearly had no idea when it happened what they should do with it. And they sent a whole bunch of folks in there in 1971. They suspended all the rules, and the folks that came rolling in there is this improbable lot, some of whom you're seeing now, that were such a mix of personalities and interests and everything that over time meshed into a group of folks that have been friends now for, 54 years. And it's been special. To give you an example, 3 of us in this room, Mark Forbes and Roger Rudolph and I, were sent to Yosemite, and part of the reason we were all sent there is to try to gain control and make people not want to tear the place up and hurt each other, but to just be associated with nature and have a good time. And we were supposed to put oil on the water. Well, 3 of us came out there in summer in the parks. To give you an idea of the kind of rangering we were doing, my first job was coordinating square dancing on the mall. Not in my uniform, but in a Summer in the Parks t-shirt and a ball cap. And if you think that's funny, Forbes and Rudolph taught visitors how to blow up an air mattress, put on their life jacket, and then they took them down the Merced River on a air mattress doing floating interpretive tours. That stuff Butch described came later. Rick and Ross Rice and Terry Penela in this room, for example, were lake patrol rangers, boat rangers on Yellowstone Lake, working for Myrnin and us. Many of you know those 2 characters from the past. One day they get a call from Myrnin and said, hey, come over here behind the ranger station. I want you to meet somebody. That person was a guy named Lynn Thompson, who had been anointed as the new superintendent after they completely stripped the leadership in Yosemite. So they met Lynn, who was sitting there smoking a cigar, and Lynn liked what he heard from them talking to him, and he said, I'll tell you what, you guys give me if you have any interest in coming to work for me in Yosemite, that's where I'm heading now, I'll make you a permanent ranger. How in the hell you could do that, I have no idea, because that's not the process, but I told you it was an emergency. And those 3 guys went over there, gave them a resume, got picked, and became permanent rangers, I think in September of '71. Another example of that was a park technician came rolling in from Mount Rushmore in a 1962 Corvette. A guy named Paul Henry, who many of you go, and there's a bunch of other stories in this room, and Kathy assured me that this guy's going to stand up with a hook and grab me off of here. Paul Henry rolled in with this Corvette. All of his belongings were in the front seat. You couldn't see out of the window. They were on the floor, on the seat, on the dashboard. The trunk, which was about this big, was full of nothing but guns and ammunition. If you knew Paul Henry, you know that that's absolutely true. Those of us that were there in the 70s, we learned our rangering, all those things Butch said. We not only learned that, we learned to live with one another, to trust each other, and to build a team that we could count on. I think all of us took that to our future careers. The basis that set us up was that Yosemite experience. 2 quick stories about Rick. Rick and I got sent to Scripps which many of you did. That was diving school at La Jolla, California. And we roomed together and were diving partners together. And toward the end, about the last 2 or 3 days, the last thing you do is a night dive in the San Diego Ship Channel. Well, Rick and I got in there, and you have your light and so forth, and we were apprehensive. There's woolly boogers living in that kelp, and we knew they were going to get us. And our chief instructor, Jim Stewart, his whole tricep, which we saw the first day, was gone, thanks to a gray shark that took his whole half of his arm off. And so Rick and I got in the water. We went under. We were told, you are not to come up till you finish the course. So we're going along, and we check each other. Man, we're not going to lose each other in that kelp. But we're just like this, looking for these all the way as we go along. Looking, then we'd look at each other. And then we go like this and look there. That went on for about 5 or 10 minutes. All of a sudden, I went like this, and Rick is gone. This is the only time in my entire career doing a lot of things that I thought, you have lost your partner, and it's your fault. And man, I came to the surface, turned off my light, and I'm looking around, there's nothing. And Jim Stewart's yelling, get underwater, you're not supposed to be up. I didn't pay any attention to him. I went back out and started looking for Rick, not there. Go to the top, turn my light off, he's not there. I went down again, no Rick. By then, I'm getting really scared. Next time I shot out of that water, tank, regulator, and everything up about this high, and I'm like a ballet dancer going like this. And I see a little faint light out there. Boy, I headed for it like this and get down there. And there's a light about 10 feet down. I get down to it, and Rick is completely tangled in monofilament fishing line. And he would have taken his tank off eventually, I'm sure, but he said, I saw you, we were going together, and you just went off and left me. I didn't feel tired or anything, I had no idea. So we cut that out, got him to the surface, and told Stewart, we're all right, we're gonna go back to the course. The other one, Rick and I was the night shift supervisor for about 3 summers. Rick was the assistant. We were both on this one night, and we went into Degnan's about 7 o'clock to get a sandwich. And in those days, Rangers had to keep their pistols hidden. They could not be exposed. So Rick had a Walther PPK stuck in his belt like this, which was held in there. He didn't have a holster. It was held in there just by his belt. And as it turned out, I got up there, ordered, we're talking to visitors. There's a whole bunch of visitors in line. They're talking, where are you folks from, and all that kind of thing. And we found out I paid for mine. Rick's order comes, and we found out the only other reason that PPK was held in place was his wallet was holding it there. So he pulls his wallet out, and that PPK goes shooting down his pants leg inside, hits his Shine Pavetta boot, and skitters across about me to Eric across the room. Everybody just froze, quit talking, and Rick goes, oops. Sorry, folks. Y'all have a nice visit. He picked up his gun, and out the door we went. Last thing I'll say is Rick never quit Ranger, and he retired in the 90s. You know all the stories of South America and so forth. A lot of us got to go down there when he got the International Lifetime Achievement Award. I talk to him all the time. I still teach, and I've gotten a lot of the stuff that I still use back as far as 1980 from Rick. And that's it.
Well, I guess we're all hearing some fabulous stories and adventures, some of whom the family hasn't ever heard as well. And that makes this an even more important and special celebration for our brother Rick. Well, the next we're going to call on Bob Howard to come up and speak.
Good afternoon. Like Butch, I'm sorry I have to read this, but that's how it goes these years, you know. It's a true honor for me to follow Dabney and Fairby here, okay? These were very important people in my life. I'm Bob Howard, and most of the time I'm known as Cherry Payne's husband, okay? And it's a real honor talking about Rick up here. Cherry ended her career as superintendent of Glacier Bay National Park up in Alaska, and I retired as a physical science scientist for the Everglades science program. Rick was the best man at Cherry and our wedding, so he's very important. But it's important to tell you, Rick ruined my career, okay? In Yosemite, I was a very happy maintenance guy, all right? As a journeyman, wage grade 9, step 5, that was a way over living wage for me, okay? As a sewage treatment plant operator, all right? Very high wages. Rick, however, endearingly called me the Tuolumne turd farmer, okay? So with that, but the only crap I used to have to work with was the real stuff, okay? Not the other. To Rick and his coworkers, especially Walt Dabney, I was known as FH because as a maintenance employee, we really didn't like rangers, okay? Somehow Rick saw something redeeming in me while, hang on a second, as I started climbing and skiing. Rick recruited me as a ski patrolman at Badger Pass, and while I was on furlough from my real job in sewage treatment, Tim Setnica started using me on technical mountain rescues because of climbing. Also, possibly you don't know, Rick was known as the silver tongue devil. He could talk. It was amazing to watch him around not very nice people. He worked on me slowly, and before I knew better, he had got me to transfer from my much lucrative maintenance job so I could now become a not very well paid GS5 Step 1, all right, campground ranger. My maintenance coworkers thought I was nuts, and I think they were right. But Rick set me up on a career path that took me and soon Cherry to multiple parks where we enjoyed really amazing careers and personal successes. And that success was thanks to Rick's support for the two of us as dual career rangers, especially during our Everglades year, when every Monday night you would find us down at the house of Rick and Kathy, eating pizza, drinking beer, and solving the park's problems, plus avoiding the mosquitoes in Flamingo, for any of you that have been in Everglades. That support from Rick continued for 30 years as both Cherry and I Rick was mine and Cherry's #1 reference to get new jobs, and he was amazingly successful for us. But when I retired, I presented Rick with a bill for $1.2 million. All right? $1.2 million, that's what I figured it was. He owed me for lost wages. I never got paid in cash, okay? I got paid in thing. Kathy, you're hereby forgiven that substantial debt, okay? But thanks to Rick, as well as you, I had a wonderful, fulfilling career as a turd farmer and a ranger, okay? Also, my career, I had a wonderful time as a career in service to the American public within the National Park Service. I'm truly indebted for all of that. Thanks, Rick. You're the best.
Our next presenter, I'd like to call forward J.D. Swed.
Well, like some of these other folks, I'm a little discombobulated up here, a little emotional, and I was just fine, but when the turd farmer starts getting emotional, didn't do me any favors there, Bob. So everybody turn up their hearing aids. Let's go. Rick Smith and I met when I was a preteen, when he was the best man at my sister Cheryl's wedding. Over the next decade, Rick and I met sporadically when visiting my sister and her husband, John Jingles, who was Rick's friend and coworker in Yellowstone. It was a lucky break for me when years later, Rick mentioned to John in a phone call that he was looking for ski patrolmen at Badger Pass in Yosemite. Well, my sister said, well, my brother's in the National Ski Patrol at a ski hill in Upper Peninsula, Michigan, that Michigan Technological University owns, and he just happens to be graduating this fall. So, phone call to Rick. Next thing I knew, I was filling out a 171, something that all of us got very good at in our careers in the Park Service. That first one that I filled out had scratch outs in it and blobs of ink from a poor pen. Despite all that, Rick hired me. My first ski season, I gave many a lesson to some clumsy national park rangers in Yosemite. That summer, Rick hired me to bear management work in Tuolumne Meadows. I was given a gun, a ticket book, a patrol vehicle, and like Butch said, I attended 40 whole hours of law enforcement training. And just like that, I became a law enforcement ranger, learning from an incredible group of older and more senior rangers who later became known as the Yosemite Mafia. Early on that year, we received a call for a medical emergency at Puppy Dome, where a group of scouts were practicing rappelling. I arrived to find a young boy dead from a long fall. As the permanent rangers conducted the investigation, Rick asked me to go and protect the scene and sit with the boy. Given that I was just a seasonal, I hope to get a little further on this. Just that I was a seasonal and a very new ranger, it meant a lot to me to be asked to do that. I've always hoped that Rick wasn't just finding me a job to do, but he sensed my capability to handle that situation with professionalism. That was one of Rick's talents, seeing the potential in people, finding a way for us to grow. And this helped us all to be a tight-knit group under Rick's guidance. I felt incredibly honored to be part of it. The following winter, low snow shut down the ski area. Rick suggested that several of us attend the Asilomar Law Enforcement Academy. The next summer, Rick hired me in the valley as a campground ranger. It was during that mid-season evaluation that Rick told me, you know, Swed, you have a problem with people who you think are not as competent as you think they should be. I'm still working on that. Rick knew life wasn't always fair, but he always tried to balance the scales where he could. While I was a seasonal ranger, I worked a summer in Grand Teton National Park. That year, rangers, a lot of them in this room, gathered in Jackson Hole to organize the first Ranger Rendezvous, the beginning of the Association of National Park Rangers. I knew most of the folks that were there because they worked in Yosemite. So I joined their discussions, throwing a few bucks in the hat as it passed around. I was also politicking for the winter seasonal caretaker position on the north rim of Grand Canyon, as Rick Gale, who was the hiring official, was there. I spent my whole paycheck at the Cowboy Bar. Well, not only did I not get the job, I was not allowed to join the ranks of the as a founding member of the Association of ANPR, Association of National Park Ranger, because I was a seasonal. Well, years later, Rick recognized this oversight, and after querying the other founding members, I was recognized at the next Ranger Rendezvous. And I'll forever be grateful for Rick helping me to be counted among our group. All right. With the help of Rick's influential reference on, as everybody has said here, on job applications throughout my 33-year, I was given the opportunity to work at some of our country's most prestigious national parks. The roles that I was hired into challenged me and allowed me to become part of the legacy of protecting our parks and defining what it means to be a park ranger. Looking back, I just don't see how this would have happened if it weren't for Rick. His ability not only to see who I was, but who I had the potential to be. Most of us are lucky indeed if someone believes in us like that. This is where I thought I'd get to without being emotional. So I'll struggle through this, I'm sure. My fondest memory with Rick was at the Ranger Rendezvous, an International Ranger Federation joint meeting at Estes Park in 2016. A lot of you were there. Rick was struggling to walk and couldn't make it to the opening ceremonies. Well, I borrowed a golf cart from the resort, and I got him to go with me. And so I drove to a little spot where we could overlook the Rangers that were out in front of us. All of them in their uniforms with flags flying from each country that they represented in the world. We stood, thanks T, we stood together at that moment of silence. They had just read all the Rangers' names who had passed in the world. It was a lot, like well over 100 in 1 year. We were looking over these uniformed Rangers. I said, Rick, did you have any idea that your efforts would result in this? He was too emotional to answer, but he took my hand. Shit. He took my hand, and we just stood there holding hands. Two men forever united and forever loved. Thank you.
Our next guest speaker today will be Jenny Rousseau.
No squeaks are going to come out. I think you've seen a trend. The last three of us, Bob, JD, and I think one of our biggest accomplishments was having Rick as a mentor. And I know there are a lot of other people that did, but thank you, Kathy, for inviting us to share with that. So I'll try to get through this. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you all who've contributed to bring us here on the doorsteps of this iconic park to celebrate the works and life of an iconic ranger. During my career, Rick was one of a handful of people who had a profound impact on my life and career. I arrived in Yosemite a little later in 1973 Fresh from introduction to park operations and an urban intake experience, Yosemite was my first permanent assignment. As a Valley girl, I worked hard to learn the ropes of rangering. It was a daunting task. I always felt that I was playing catch-up compared to the tight group who arrived together in the park a few years earlier and who were leading the way, those 1971 ones. By 1976, when Rick took over the night shift supervisor in the Valley, he had honed his skills and hit his stride as a ranger's ranger, and my life changed. Prior to that summer, I had spent much of my time in training and covering the roads during major incidents. But now I was asked to take the lead on rescues, assume some supervisory roles, and was nudged out of my comfort zone, utilizing the skills and experiences I had accrued. Rick's quiet but commanding presence was everywhere. He led by example and instilled confidence and commitment in those on his watch. He rode along on patrol, and I learned from each encounter. A group of Latino men involved in a minor motor vehicle accident were speaking Spanish, attempting to get their story straight, as Rick and I stood by. Only after they'd finished, to their surprise, did Rick begin conversing with them in perfect Spanish, this white-haired, silver-tongued devil, and ask what had happened and if they needed assistance. On another incident, while riding together one night, we got a call of a man with a gun on the road near Yellow Pines Campground, and some of you know what that meant. Coming up on the area, we observed an individual, one of our non-traditional park visitors, standing in the middle of the road. Rick stopped the car, and we both exited. I drew my gun and stood in the crux of the door as Rick casually approached the person. I couldn't hear the conversation between them, but the subject reached down into the pocket of his overalls and slowly drew out a revolver, butt first. "He's got a gun," I yelled. At that point, I was laser focused on what that man did with the weapon. If at any point he had raised the barrel, I knew I would shoot. He casually handed the weapon to Rick, who took it just as easily. After a short discussion, Rick gave him directions to Yellow Pines. I didn't have to clean out my pants, though, later. During that summer, Rick effortlessly coordinated multiple incidents and was usually the last one to leave the briefing room. After scrutinizing reports, he was an English teacher, right? He had parents who were English. Guess what that did to your report? How many times you redid it? He led from the front by example with quiet encouragement, humor, and constructive feedback that was succinct and to the point, but with the insights that made you think. His questions stirred thought and analysis. He didn't necessarily give you the answers, but he offered perspective that led you to choices. Rick always had our back, as somebody else said. And with that support came confidence and ability to critique our actions and look for ways to improve. He had the ability to draw out the best in those who worked for him and with him, and he was really a good listener. By the time I moved on from Yosemite, Rick had provided me a tool belt full of skills to draw from. He instilled in me a foundation that carried me through my career. He had many sayings, and I still fall back on them, and some of you have mentioned them. Rangering is a calling, not a job. Take care of your people using encouragement and support. do the right thing. Do something, not nothing. And an overall belief that the National Park System, not necessarily the National Park Service. Throughout my career and into retirement, I knew that Rick was always there as a friend and a touchstone. He always called me Virginia. I'll miss that.
Our next presenter will be Sarah Otterstrom.
Hello, Sarah. This is Rick. I can hear that voice. Anytime I think of him, I hear that. This is Rick. And it's the power of that voice and that power of the tender and kind calls he would always make stay with me. And as I was preparing for this, I was thinking of the things that I think about in Rick and what I experienced and who I knew him to be. And there are three things that stand out. First, he was passionate about nature conservation. He strongly believed in nature and its importance in our lives. He was a wise counselor. I learned so much from him. And as we've been hearing from you all, he was an advocate and a friend. I came to know Rick a year after I co-founded a nonprofit called Paso Pacifico, and we had this brilliant idea to connect ecosystems so that we can have wildlife, of connectivity of habitats for wildlife. And we thought, oh, this will be surely pretty easy because we're working in the tropics where there's lots of beautiful, charismatic wildlife. And through one of our board members, who was a professor at Albion College, we heard about Rick Smith and his incredible international service to nature conservation. And so we connected with him, and he took the time to learn about some of our challenges in the landscape that we're working to protect. And after joining the board and a few months, he got on a call with me and he said, you know, Sarah, I think it's time you get some rangers. And I had no idea what that would entail. I came from a background as an ecological scientist. And so he said, okay, well, I'm going to come to Nicaragua, and we're going to hire rangers. And what was amazing about what he did was he made it an open call to the whole entire community. He had a job description, and he invited everyone to participate, whether they were former poachers or current poachers. He didn't care. He wanted to hear from them. And then we ended up hiring rangers, and he started out with a lesson. What does it mean to be a ranger? And it was so, that lesson was aspirational, is who can we become as rangers? And I really want to say, if you imagine rural Nicaragua where poverty rates are high, where just 10 years or 15 years before there was a civil war being carried out in that very landscape, and to have this aspiration of, I can become a ranger, was truly transformative for some of these people. And then he went forward once the Rangers got on, was in really supporting them in training in science, scientific methods in collecting data, CPR training, nonviolent confrontation and how to solve conflict. And on one of my first trips with him and the Rangers, Rick was part of a team that applied the first satellite transmitter to an eastern Pacific hawksbill sea turtle, a critically endangered sea turtle species. So he was always just really active in engaging both with the science and with just the rangers themselves. Rick was a wise counselor, and I think at first I didn't recognize his wisdom because I didn't understand what it meant, what resource management meant, or rangering. And it was funny, early on he said, you know, Sarah, the rangers need to learn what is at stake. And I was like, yeah, sure, they need to learn what's at stake. He said, we're gonna get them up in an airplane. And there he connected with his friend Kevin and found a way to get an organization, Kavu, to donate their time and the pilots to donate their time to come down and bring rangers up into the sky. And these are people who'd never been on an airplane in their lives. And they flew across Western Nicaragua, seeing the potential to connect forest, to protect mangroves, and to realize the importance of their new duties as community rangers. And, you know, as part of that, Rick kept advocating for the rangers themselves. He helped them apply for the International Ranger Academy, which was a 2 or 3 month course in Argentina. And some of these men who had never flown before all of a sudden found themselves training with other rangers from many countries on how to become world-class rangers. And he made those scholarships possible. He made that opportunity possible for them. After a couple years, and as we were managing, you know, trying to reduce community poaching of sea turtle nests, really engaging a younger generation in rangering, he said, you know, Sarah, I think it's time that we have some female rangers. And of all the people to say no, I was like, no, Rick, we can't do that. And because I just, you know, I'm thinking about, well, the beach is dangerous at night, and, you know, there's social norms and cultural things that really are going to prevent women from being supported in the community. Said, no, Sarah, it's time. And so we opened up the application process for women, and we had 5 women, female rangers join the team. And they have been phenomenal, and they're still, 4 of them are still with us. And they move between sometimes on the remote beaches at night and day, supporting junior rangers. And yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. And at the same time, Rick also helped us to start a program called the Junior Rangers. And the Junior Rangers is an environmental education program that we kind of copied from the National Park Service, but it's a year-long program for children, and kids earn badges, and they do both service projects and have different curricular units. And one important aspect that Rick really infused in that was that the children learn about environmental service and community service, and that through that process they become leaders. Because of Rick's vision around our ranger program, our rangers went on to win international ranger awards, grassroots conservation awards at international science organizations, and they've been highly regarded and respected both in their communities and throughout international conservation. But, you know, deep down at the core, what I've learned, and especially in the last few years, is that Rick is an incredible advocate and friend. Rick always, when he departed from the board and finished his service on the board, he really wanted to know that we had a good board leadership. And he connected us with Lottie Roche, who joined our board and became board president. And without him advocating for us and for connecting us with good resources, that wouldn't have been possible. he also like talked us up a lot. You guys have probably heard about our organization through him. And he talked a lot to his friend Mike Finley about us. And he was always, you know, when Mike was at the Turner Foundation, he would be asking for some resources. And he even recently, 2 years ago, I got a direct phone call from Mike Finley. He said, "Sarah, I'm on the board of this organization, and you're the only person who can solve this." And it was about community, working with communities in conservation. But that was not because Mike Finley knew that. It was because Rick had told him that. And he knew and trusted Rick. And I'm grateful for that. And he's also brought numerous friends, donors, advocates on board with our organization and our work in Central America. And I'm so grateful. Finally, like Rick always was giving words of encouragement to me as a conservation leader. He would send me little gifts. The most recent was a beautiful sea turtle T-shirt. He would always forward me news, good news about sea turtle protection around the world. He would constantly check in on me when there was a political crisis in Nicaragua. He was on the phone, he was on the internet, he was completely on top of the situation, concerned for the ranger team and concerned for me. And that meant everything to me. One thing for us all, we filled this room here, but what we need to know is that Rick's friends are far and wide, all around the world. And one of the female rangers who still works on our team shared a message today, as I shared with them that I would be here today. Her name is Yahaira. And she said, "Although Rick is not with us in person, his spirit, his labor will always be with us and in our hearts. He will always be remembered by the Rangers of Nicaragua. His constant fight will always be with us, because in each of us, he planted hope. Fly high as the birds in the forest and in the echo of the mountains." Thank you.
And our next presenter will be Bill Kashchak.
Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by mentioning the honor that I feel right now. Is that better? Thank you. I'm truly honored to be a part of this celebration of life for Rick Smith. I'm even more honored that Kathy would ask me to offer a few thoughts about some of Rick's work internationally. To set a bit of context of Rick and I getting to know each other and work together, we met in the early 2000s, about 20 years ago. At that time, I was living and working in the Dominican Republic, part of a team on a project financed by USAID to provide assistance to a burgeoning and not very strong Secretariat of Natural Resources. It later became a Ministry of Natural Resources. The purpose and goals of that project was to provide the skills and tools to the Dominican government, to the Secretariat of Natural Resources, to protect the environment and to manage the natural resources of that part of the island in a very sustainable way. I might point out that at that point, tourism accounted for just shy of 20% of the Dominican economy. One of every $5 that were generated in the Dominican Republic in the early 2000s came from the 4 million plus tourists who visited that part of the island every year. What was the attraction? What brought them there? Well, the natural resources. Beautiful Caribbean saltwater, beautiful seas. Unspeakably beautiful white sandy beaches. A chain of coral reefs were world class. And, as I came to learn during my time there, the Dominican has the highest point in the Caribbean, and that point is over 9,000 feet. Hard to imagine, was for me. But I'm in the Caribbean, living on an island. They got a place that's almost twice as high as Denver, Colorado. Did have the chance to visit there in January and February. It got cold. It didn't snow, but if there was enough frost around to make us use the fireplace, to be sure. At that point, the project had three components of our assistance. The first was to work with secretary officials to develop a policy regime. You cut away all the smoke and mirrors. What does that mean? It means developing laws, norms, standards, local community ordinances to help achieve that goal, to provide the guidance, the framework for achieving that goal of protecting the environmental resources and using them in sustainable ways. Now remember, one of every $5 is being generated through tourism, and the attraction is the environmental resources. So it's about, hey, be green to make green. Se verde para generar verde. That became the slogan of the project. And it became nationwide. It was known. And the strengthening of the infrastructure, the institutional infrastructure, at that point, what we needed was a pro. We needed someone. The Dominican Republic has a chain of national parks and reserves, protected areas of over 80 units. Okay, and it shares an island with Haiti. It's not that large of a country. The difference between Haiti and Dominican Republic is that back in, about 40 years ago, they decided to create a national park system. So Dominican Republic stayed green, Haiti is very brown. Okay. A burgeoning institution came into being to help manage this network of 80 plus units. Limited skills, very limited experience, and that included a cadre of park rangers. What we needed at that time was a pro. What we needed was someone who could provide, could scope out the level of efficiency, inefficiency, the level of technical competency, and what needed to be done through this, with this burgeoning organization, particularly with respect to the park rangers. As I was casting about, a colleague of mine mentioned Rick to me. They had worked together at some point prior to this, and he provided me with a contact point, a phone number. I phoned Rick from the Dominican Republic, and first I contacted him via email, then we set up a date for a phone call, which was a get to know you and an interview call. It was during that conversation that Rick clearly demonstrated to me that technically he commanded the field. He knew what he was about. He knew what conservation and sustainable use of natural resources entailed. But this had to be done in Spanish. So to probe Rick's Spanish, I shifted the conversation from English to Spanish. He blew me away. It was perfect. And not only was it perfect in generalized conversational Spanish, but idiomatic Spanish from different countries in Latin America. And I've lived in 7 or 8 of them and have been exposed to a fair number of idioms. But he also knew the technical vocabulary that was needed in Spanish. I'd found my guy. I'd found my man. That led to a contract arrangements, and subsequently Rick came to the DR over a 2-year period numerous times. And he brought with him, he recommended a colleague from Uruguay, Juan Carlos Cabretta, who also joined Rick on more than one of his visits. And parenthetically, Kathy joined Rick also on one of those visits. And that was a special treat. Rick came, assessed the situation to begin with. There was a report. He wrote it. He was an English major. It was good. And then there were recommendations. Okay, this is the situation. What to do about it? We had a 5-year project. There was time. We were not being rushed. Okay. With that in hand, Spanish copy also, which I shared with our Dominican counterparts, we embarked on a course of action, of remediation, of upgrading, of training. Rick and Juan Carlos were the keys to that. As I said, they both came back repeatedly, and their stays were 3 weeks or so at a time. Maybe it occurred 2 or 3 times a year, to carry out technical assistance and training courses. It was training of trainers, a cadre of managers from the Secretariat of Natural Resources and rangers were the direct beneficiaries of the knowledge that Rick and Juan Carlos were transmitting. They in turn were to train other rangers. Okay. I had that, truly was a wonderful experience on more than one occasion to sit in the classroom. Some of it was classroom training, to be sure, to observe Rick and Juan Carlos operating. I also went to the field when they were in the national parks, and Rick in particular was doing ecological interpretation. He made the flora and the fauna in that particular eco niche come alive. It was vibrant. And it was Rick not only knowing the relationships among the species that were there, but being able to talk in a way that was extremely, extremely intelligible and comprehensible about the values and the importance of the interrelationships of the eco niches. Again, he blew me away. Using his good offices internationally, his contributions, the value that he added. I might step forward a moment, say at the end of those 5 years, we received very laudable marks from USAID and the success. The project was a success. Rick added value. He added enormous value and contributed directly and meaningful ways to that success. He didn't stop there. Okay, he did not. Through his relationships with the International Ranger Association, he made the connections that sent a group of Dominican park rangers, me too, to Argentina, to a convention, to a conference, to a rally. The value of him doing that, and this was outside of his contract. It was outside of the contractual obligations that he had with us, okay? These Dominican rangers could hear firsthand from rangers who were more experienced, who had worked on programs in Peru, Machu Picchu, and other, in Ecuador, Galapagos, in Argentina, in Chile, Patagonia, all right? Get their direct experience and some indications, some clues as to how they go about doing their jobs to protect these places. They also had the opportunity to network with rangers from institutions that had longer life, had a longer history, and more experienced. That was invaluable. There are a couple of other chapters to this. Number one, Sarah in Paso Pacifico. Years after the Dominican Republic project came to an end, Rick and I had developed, over this time of his working with us, we had developed a very close and lasting friendship. It included, by the way, me being included in Who You Got, the annual teasing tournament among a cadre of Rick's friends on the NCAA Final Four basketball tournament, which there was a whole bunch of bragging and not much skill, I think. I got a call from Rick one day, and he said, in Nicaragua, the manager of our program, as Sarah described, really was about the community. It was be green to make green. She would like to get a master's degree. At the time, I was teaching on a part-time basis at the University of New Hampshire in a graduate program on sustainable community development. Rick found a benefactor for her. The university provided scholarship money. Lisa completed a master's degree. That was Rick. Rick triggered that. Flipping the roles, I was in Honduras and I was teaching at the Zamorano, the Central American Agricultural School, founded by an American agribusiness company 80 years ago. Yeah, thank you. Every senior at that university needs to do an internship for 1 semester. I called Rick. Said, what do you think about the National Park Service? Could something like that be arranged? Rick made it happen. Some of the seniors spent 2-3 month periods at distinct national parks. That was Rick. Throughout, first-class professional, no question. But more than that, he was more than just a first-class person, a person with passion, love, understanding. I'm really proud to have been able to spend some chapters of our lives with him. Thanks.
My dear friend, my name is Ed Rosado. I long enjoyed Rick's friendship, starting when we were both young seasonal rangers at Lake Station in Yellowstone. That was 59 years ago, and I'm still counting. The memories are here. They will be with us forever. I'm not going to stop counting. My assignment today is to explain Rick's involvement with the International Ranger Federation and its role in will conservation. The IRF was chartered in 1992 by 3 national ranger societies, including our own, the ANPR, and Rick was very and quickly involved. He attended the first World Congress, which was in 1995 in Poland, and he ultimately served later as the IRS president, second president, for 6 years. The World Congress is about every 3 years. Unfortunately, he could not attend the 2024 Congress, but as we all heard, the group there got together and recognized him with what's called the Gordon Miller. If you know Gordon Miller, you know this is a great award. If you don't, take my word for it, okay? Gordon Miller IRF Award for Lifetime Achievement. He was fluent, as we talked, from his Peace Corps days in Spanish, in a particular deep association, really deep. They've all said it, but I will reinforce it. He conducted at least one major project in each of the South and Central American countries. I think, for an example, he went to Jamaica 7 times, okay? This guy, if he was on your side, he was there. His support of Costa Rica was a special example, as their park system and their ranger group was really very nascent. His early work there was as a World Bank consultant before there was ever really a park system in Costa Rica. After weeks of exploring the country's wilds, the mountains, the rivers, the jungles, he wrote a report back to the World Bank. And I can summarize it here. Send them the check. And thus was born, if you've been there, a wonderful park system. And we owe it to Rick. Costa Rica then hosted, again, very early in their development, the 1997 World Congress. Several dozen world companies attended. I could tell you a lot of great stories. I don't have time for that. The programs were simulcast in both English and Spanish. And it was all made possible because Rick and Bill Wade pre-volunteered a logistics team and said, if you host it, we'll do it for you. And they did a very good job. Other IRF accomplishments that Rick supported included, as mentioned, International Ranger Schools training, advising rangers how they could organize new professional associations of their own, raising funds so that all these poor international rangers, often very poor, could attend the World Congresses. There were regular newsletters in his time in English and in Spanish. He helped establish World Ranger Day. It started in 2007, and every year it's held on July 31st. the next time you hear it being celebrated, think about Rick. Okay. He also provided and organized skilled ranger consultant teams when he couldn't go for others to go all over the world. Okay. He helped create the Thin Green Line Foundation. You got to look it up. Okay. It's raised thousands and thousands of dollars, and they give grants to the needy families of rangers who were killed in the line of duty. These people do not have insurance. They're poor. They can't even afford clothes sometimes. And this group saves their family lives, unfortunately, after they're gone. As an example, in '24, we lost 150 rangers, wardens, and other protection people who were dying to save our resources. And the Thin Green Line, which Rick was a helper in starting, was there to help the families. Again, I could tell you more stories. I'm sorry, but I won't. I'm closing with three. Weasel smiled when he heard closing. Okay. I'm closing with three anecdotes of those commitment skills and often bravery that Rick inspired and developed in the International Ranger ranks. In one case, at the Congress in Bolivia, it was very hot, right? The host rangers continued to wear their hot, heavy, woolen dress uniforms. Hot, heavy woolen. Get the picture? While all the rest of us, we had the initial ceremony, we wore our uniforms and we bailed. We got on t-shirts and whatever, okay? And I noticed this and I inquired about it. And somebody said to me, they explained, the hosts are very poor. These are the best clothes they have, their uniforms. And they wanted to represent their country and their profession proudly. It's a small thing, but it registered with me. And Rick was at the core of this stuff, okay? There was a solo, remote backcountry female ranger, Argentine ranger, with a very deep voice and a long, deep scar in her throat. She had been slashed when attacked by a poacher with a machete. That's a knife with a big H, okay? Okay. Anyway, in a desperate fight, she killed him. Made her way home, many miles back to Stephanie, entirely on her own, and she had wrapped her throat to save her life with her shirt. Some years, a little while later, she was being interviewed about what it was like to be a ranger. And she explained, almost just in these few words, it's an ordinary job, but I'm dedicated to it. She never mentioned the attack that almost cost her life, okay? In another example, there were three rangers in South Africa's Kruger's Park. They're out on patrol, they'd gone out with very limited resources, and they arrested 12 poachers who had just machine gunned an entire herd of elephants for their tusks. Sounds like normal stuff, but here's the key detail. They had left camp to go on their duty with surplus World War I bolt action, one bullet at a time rifles, and amongst the three of them, they only had 2 cartridges, okay? One of the rangers had been completely bluffing when he stood up, did his duty with an empty old weapon facing off against people who had AK-47s, okay? As an international ranger once said, we do not save the parks and animals for ourselves, we do it for the rest of the world. That's us. They've done it for us. And Rick was at the core of that, okay? This is the kind of commitment and spirit that Rick led, inspired, developed, trained, and supported, okay? There are now more than 60 countries and over 160 member groups doing this kind of work. When Rick started, there were only 3, okay? I mean, I don't know, there's a percentage there. There's a math professor out here has pretty amazing performance. I was gonna go on, but Weasel wouldn't let me. I had 3 more papers, but they'll be in the memory book. 2 are from IRF presidents, and 1 is from an IRS vice president who Rick recruited to be his vice president. Bill already talked about him. Juan Carlos is known as the John Moore of Uruguay. Go look for those stories. They're really pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to close. Thank you, Rick. Okay. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing him with us. And thank you all for putting up with my stuff.
Well, Ed, I wasn't smiling because you were approaching the time limit. I was smiling after hearing all of those just wonderfully warm and supportive stories of Rick. We have another presenter now, Dr. Rod Nash.
Folks, you've been here a long time, and I'm the anchor speaker. How about that? I'm going to change the pace a little bit, and I'm going to talk about something Rick really knew well. I mean, really knew well, and that was 1950s popular music. Okay? And I'm going to give you his favorite lyric. I've heard him say this a dozen times. I'm going to give you the lyric. And I'm going to see if anybody, I'm a professor, remember, so I do quizzes. So I'm going to see if anybody can name the song, name that tune. Here's the lyric. Ready? Just tell your hoodlum friends outside you don't have time to take a ride.
The Coasters.
What's the song?
Yakety Yak.
And what's the rest of the title?
Don't talk.
You're the man. A for the course. Thank you. He loved 50s. He loved 50s music. I met Rick here right around the corner at the Albright Training Center. Gwen Brady was there. I think she might be here today. Thank you, Gwen, for your welcome long ago there. And a guy I always called Diamond Jim Brady was there. And Shira, we thank for him. They helped me settle in, and I met Rick Smith at that point. And I realized that, you know, his interest in park history and in environmental history really transcended that of a lot of people in ranger work. And he really wanted to dig in a little bit. He'd been a teacher. He'd been a master's student. He had philosophical interest in what I was doing, the books I was writing. And I later brought him over to talk in my classes to students like Mark Linehan, Kevin Roach, to go on seminars on the river in which we discussed issues that were important to us both. So what to talk about? You know, there's so many hundreds of nights and times that I've spent with Rick, diving, skiing, sailing, rivers. I was and am a professional Grand Canyon River guide. I've been one certified for 50 years, and I've spent a lot of time right behind me here, a lot of time in the Grand Canyon, in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And Rick did some trips with me, and he had the ability to sort of slide up and learn what river running was about. He said, let me learn from you about what it's like to row a dory through the Grand Canyon. We call those eggshells. There are a lot of rocks down there. And at first, Rick just rowed along. And then at one point, I said, would you like to row a little bit, Rick? And he said, is there anything serious ahead? And I said, it's all serious. And he understood. And he went on to row his own boat. I think he had a golden record down there. I don't believe he ever flipped a boat. Can't say that for myself. But then again, I had a lot more trips. But Rick never did flip a boat. He quit while he was ahead. But I'm not going to talk about rivers so much today. I'm going to talk about one particular trip that we did in the 1990s, which we called our retirement trip. He was retiring from the Park Service. I was retiring from the university. I had a tugboat that we had cruised up the Inside Passage with Wally Heaton, among others. His name has been mentioned today. And we said, let's cross the Sea of Cortez, the Gulf of California, in the tugboat. And we started out, this is wild, wild country. There are islands in the Sea of Cortez that have never been climbed. Never. Everest's been climbed, not those islands. They're full of rattlesnakes, they're full of desert stuff. And we made our way across the Sea of Cortez, and then, after all those years, disaster struck. Oh my gosh, the refrigerator broke in the boat. And our wives were coming down with provisions. In fact, they were going to smuggle steaks down, cross the border into Mexico and meet us on the Mexican side. Now, I don't know if this was Kathy's idea, but smuggling steaks was a really good idea because they're just meat, right? They're just meat. I mean, the X-ray isn't going to pick them up. It's not like you got a gun. It's not like you got anything really bad in little vials called drugs, but it's just meat, and they had steaks stuffed into their pockets. The customs guy just said, "You're a little chubby there around the hips, girls." But he let them through. And so Rick and I are wondering, how are we going to get the refrigerator back working? Our wives are coming down. It's hot. We're going back out on the boat. There's not much ice. So we took the refrigerator out of the boat. We put it on the dock. And everybody came by. When you got a refrigerator on the dock, everybody's your friend. Everybody comes by. "Oh, that's too bad about your refrigerator." "Well, here's something you can do. I'm going to tell you what to do." We got all sorts of advice. One of those pieces of advice was, turn it upside down for a night. Okay, well, what the heck? Nothing else would work, so we turned it upside down. Then how do you get help to fix a refrigerator down there in Mexico? Well, there's a guy. It's hard to reach him. You got to leave a note on his ex-girlfriend's door, and maybe he'll come. So Rick wrote this out in Spanish. He's very good Spanish, we've heard today. He wrote it out in Spanish and put it on the door. Went back to the dock. And sure enough, the guy comes down. And Rick starts out with his Peace Corps Spanish, "Gracias para su ayuda." And the guy says, "Forget all that stuff." He said, "I went to UC San Diego for 4 years. I speak English better than you do." And we said, okay. So then the guy said, "Okay, what have you done? What have you done?" You remember those signs in the auto repair shops where they say, if you watch us, it's $100 an hour. If you help us, it's $200 an hour. So what have you done? And and then after he did that, he paused and he said, "You guys haven't turned it upside down, have you?" He said it the same way that a principal would say, "You guys weren't smoking in the bathroom, were you?" "Oh, no." So both of Rick and I right together said, "Oh, of course not. Who would do that? Turn a refrigerator upside down? That would be really dumb." Well, in any event, he fixed the refrigerator. And the stakes came down. And our marriages were saved. And Rick, I just want you to know that that boat's still floating, and I never turned the refrigerator upside down. Thank you.
Well, at this point, as you might see in your program, we were going to have one other presenter, and he and his wife, Elvira, could not be here today because she's having some surgery and recovering from that. But we have placed that reflection that Rob was going to make in the program, and so at this point in time, we're very close to wrapping up our celebration for Rick. Before it comes to a close, I would really again like to thank our presenters. Well, those stories, and like I said, so many of them, even as family, we have not heard. They're just so heartwarming, and it has just made the day and some of the, the trauma and the sadness that we've been going through just a little bit easier on us today. I'd like to thank our organizers as well, and Kathy mentioned that. And I'd like to thank you all for coming from near and far to get together to pay tribute and honor Rick. We talked about our family members here today. I'd like to thank my wife, Kim, who has been with me side by side as we've gone through this. And it just was so welcoming when Rick and my brother Phil met Kim and welcomed her into our family. And it just has helped me, and it's helped all of our family with the support that we all get. But, you know, most of all, I would like to recognize and thank Kathy, whose love and, her life with Rick has appeared in every single detail of this celebration. Kathy, thank you. Thank you so much. I really can't think of a better way of, having our celebration close like this. And I know that Rick would have envisioned this celebration exactly like it is today. Thank you all so very, very much.